This is The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro, the third Ishiguro book to have been published by the Folio Society, and this edition was issued in 2023. As usual for the Folio Society, we receive a slipcase. On this occasion, it's covered in this muted green paper and printed with a wraparound design, which features this fantasy landscape populated by figures in black silhouette. And then the whole design has been overlaid with this geometric swirly pattern of gold lines. Overall, I think it's a nice and tasteful slipcase design. In terms of construction, it's a pretty standard Folio Society offering. It's not super rigid, and it is lined with white paper. I think I would have preferred a black paper lining, which would have slightly better matched the tone of the book and perhaps looked a little bit more premium, but that's a minor quibble. Otherwise, I think this is a reasonably nice looking slipcase. Next, we have the book itself. It is bound in full cloth, and it too is printed with a wraparound design. In fact, it's the same basic design that we saw on the slipcase with that same fantasy landscape. But now elements of that design have been blocked in bright red. So we see the sword, the figures here are also picked out in red. And it really does look very bright and striking, even against a background that is itself red. So I think that makes the design of this book look quite interesting and exciting, and I like it. Over here on the spine, we have the title is also blocked in that bright red colour, and the author's name is printed in black. The design feels a little bit like it could be prone to rubbing, so I keep my copy in a protective mylar dust jacket. We have green end bands and otherwise a pretty standard edge to the text block. So overall, I think a pretty nice binding design for this book. I think the binding sits quite nicely alongside the slipcase, perhaps because red and green are complementary colours, and I think the overall design is quite tastefully executed. Now we open the book onto green end papers printed with a geometric design, just like the one we saw on the slipcase, and the end papers feel like they're made from a fairly heavyweight stock. The book itself, like most modern Folio Society editions, is printed on Abbey wove paper. This is a thoroughly modern feeling, refined, acid-free paper. It's certainly a step up from anything you'll find in a trade edition at your local bookstore. And then we arrive at the title spread, and besides the fact that this is The Buried Giant by Ishiguro, we'll see that we have an introduction by Daniel Kelman and illustrations by Jana Heidersdorf. And the first example of one of those illustrations is here, serving as a frontispiece. As usual, on the copyright page, we have some production details. So we see the book is set in Arno, and the display face is Sabbath Black, which is this face we see here. The other thing we see is that this book was both printed and bound in Wales. Here on the list of illustrations, we see that there are 7 full-page colour illustrations provided by Jana Heidersdorf. In addition, there'll be 4 part title illustrations that we'll also see as we look through the book. Here's the first page of Daniel Kelman's 4-page introduction. It's a pretty nice introduction that does a good job of picking up the major themes and emotional notes that the book strikes. The introduction does contain major spoilers, and in fact Kelman advises readers to first read the novel and then come back to reading the introduction. And then we come into the book itself. It's divided into 4 parts. Each starts with, as I said, a title illustration by Jana Heidersdorf, there in black and white. Here's the first of those. And then we see here on the recto page an example of the general typographic plan of the book, which is a fairly straightforward one. I think the leading, that is to say the line spacing, is generous enough to make reading of the book comfortable. Now let's leaf through and we'll take a look at some of those illustrations by Jana Heidersdorf. These illustrations have a wistful quality about them. I think they're very suitable for a fantasy novel like this one. They remind me in some way of the work of Caspar David Friedrich, which is by no means a bad thing, and I think that's eminently suitable for the illustration of this particular work. And here is the one and only 2-page illustration that we have in the book. Folio Society doesn't always use the highest end production processes and materials, but one thing I do appreciate is that when they include colour plates in their books, they're always printed with good clarity and vibrancy, and this book is certainly no exception. So that is The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro, published by the Folio Society in 2023. I think it's a nicely put together edition. I think there are a lot of nice design choices here, and I enjoyed reading the book as well. Ishiguro, I think this was his first foray into fantasy writing, but it clearly has the marks of his literary past. I think my one quibble might be with the pricing. So the list price of this book is £75. That makes it a little bit more expensive than most of Folio Society's standard edition catalogue. And it used to be that when you paid a premium over the typical standard edition price, that would buy you an edition like Dune or Moby Dick or The Call of Cthulhu. And many in the community would hold those types of books up to be examples of Folio Society's very best work in the standard edition category. This certainly feels like a nicely put together edition, and we do have some upgrades relative to many books in the catalogue, like the printed slipcase, the inclusion of those additional part title illustrations, but it's a little bit difficult to feel like it reaches quite the highs of those other great editions of the past I mentioned. And indeed, when I think about other recent editions like Rebecca, for example, they are much closer in my mind to the quality of this particular edition, and Rebecca was priced, if I remember correctly, at about £45. So no complaints at all about this edition. It's a very nice example of Folio Society's standard edition work, and I think those who buy it won't be at all disappointed. I do wish they could have hit a slightly lower price point.